Hello and welcome back to chapter number 3 of this lecture series on CCNA cybersecurity operations with me, Joachim Kjæverestad from the University of Skövde. If you want to know more about what we're doing, follow the URLs in this very nice introduction slide. With chapter 3, it's become time to talk a little bit about the operating system Linux, and we'll actually divide this lecture into 3 parts: Linux overview, administration, and hosts. With this first lecture, we're going to go through an overview of Linux with some of the basics, and then we'll go into Linux administration and talk a little bit about basic server administration and the Linux file system. And then in the final part, the recording number 3, we'll talk a little bit about working with the Linux graphical user interface and working on the Linux host. So what is Linux? Well, for those of you who don't already know, Linux is an open source operating system that comes in many different distributions. So you may have heard about Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat, but there are a number of less common Linux distributions like Arch Linux and whatever is out there. And basically anyone who wants to can take the Linux kernel and do their own Linux distribution that is designed just as they want it to be. One of the biggest strengths with Linux is that it provides a very powerful CLI, so very, very powerful command line interface. And it allows the user to have much more control of the operating system than in Windows. And it basically allows for better network communication control, because the philosophy here is that the user can modify anything. So you could say that Linux is an operating system that provides the ability to be much more advanced, because you can actually change everything about it given the correct skills, of course. And Linux is a very, very powerful part of the Secure Operations Center. The flexible nature of Linux makes it ideal for use in the Secure Operations Center. And this is because the administrator can choose to add packages tailored for a security analysis platform. So you can have a pre-existing or created distribution of Linux that holds everything that you need. And there are some such platforms that are already made, such as Kali Linux that you may have heard about, that comes with a lot of packages or a lot of tools for network analysis, for encryption, for stuff like that. By the way, when I say package, that is the term that in Linux is used for applications. So a package is basically an application. So apart from common SOC tools, a Linux box in the SOC will commonly contain some tools for penetration testing. So for instance, you may have Metasploit that you can use to analyze and attack a system. Some of the tools that you commonly find in a SOC is a network package capture software that allows you to capture data as it traverses the network for inspection. Malware analysis tools where you can deassemble and reassemble a malware to really see what it does. Intrusion detection system that we're going to talk more about later. Firewalls, it's the same. Log managers, which are tools that allows you to collect logs from different sources and manage them in one aggregated way. Those security information and event monitoring systems, or CMs, that are there for information aggregation. And basically, I want to pause here a little bit. The CM is a very powerful tool and there is a big difference between CMs and log aggregation tools. So using log servers, that's common practice that you combine logs from different sources into one log server. But the purpose of a CM is that it should be able to abstract the logs. So you have logs from different sources, from system logs, from firewalls, from intrusion detection systems, and you can also have information about different types of attacks, making it possible for the CM to automatically evaluate the logs and give more abstract warnings. So for instance, by looking at a number of, failed login attempts from different sources, it can tell you that something's going on. You would also, of course, have a ticketing system in a SOC. A ticketing system is basically a system that takes care of tickets submitted by users. So you can have a good way of handling errands that are to be handled by the SOC. So let's talk a little bit about the Linux shell, because to really understand the power of Linux, one should really be comfortable with the Linux shell or the CLI. And using the Linux shell is basically about using different commands and parameters that you type, you hit enter, and something happens. So a very easy and common command is ls, which you use to list the contents of a directory. So ls in this case is the command, and a is the parameter that tells ls to include all hidden files in the output. If you want to find information about a command, you can use the built-in man pages, and this is also a very good thing with Linux. Almost all commands come with man pages. Almost, if not all, commands come with man pages. So if you know that, well, I'm gonna use ls for this purpose, but you want to know what parameters there are, then you can just type man ls, and you'll have a built-in help that tells you everything you need to know about ls. And usually the man pages come with great usage examples, so you can really see how the command can be used in different ways using different parameters. Linux contains configuration files, or Linux contain configuration in configuration files, and those are commonly plain text files. So it's very, very important to be familiar with a text editor. And a text editor, in contrast to a word processor like the Office package, is that it's sort of comparable to Notepad. It's a tool that allows you to write and edit plain text. And there are a few different, Nano, Vim, or some people claim that there is even one called Emacs. And you can say that Nano is a simplistic text editor that most people feel comfortable using quite easily, while Vim is a little bit more advanced. In my opinion, I would say that using Vim is not that much harder, but it's so much more powerful. So if you haven't heard about any text editor since before, go with Vim and you will eventually learn it, and you can do so much more things than you can do with Nano. So many users of Linux rely on CLI-based text editors. They are easier to use for remote access and doesn't require a graphical user interface to be installed. And it's actually quite common that you only use text-based Linux, especially if you're running some server on Linux. So make sure that if you have to, or if you want to learn Linux, learn how to use the CLI. So actually, everything in Linux is treated as a file, which doesn't only include files, but also stuff like memory, drivers, and such. And with a proper permission, you can use a text editor or text viewer to view the content of basically whatever. So in combination to being able to use Nano or Vim to open and modify a text file, there are a few different tools that you can use to read a text file in different ways. So first we have the command cat that will open and display the contents of a file. You have head, which displays the top portion of a file, or tail that it displays the bottom portion of a file. I find that tail is especially useful when you look at log files, because then you're usually interested in the most recent activity, and that is what tail will display. I also want to urge you that if you have no prior experience with Linux, this is a very good time to pause, do lab 3.1.2.6 to learn just a little bit about how to work with the CLI. So that will really help you get up to speed and get an idea of what we're talking about. So ending this lecture, client and servers, or clients and server, are concepts that I should tell you about in this chapter, because that's where Cisco decided to put it. And you can easily say that clients are computers that use services. So machines that are meant for an end user to, for instance, use a web server by browsing the internet, use an SSH server to connect to, and so on and so forth. And servers, in turn, are computers with software that deliver services. And in terms of networking, different services are identified with different port numbers. So this port number is an addressing mechanism that we will talk more about in the networking lesson. But for now, just know that different services are identified using different port numbers. And, well, this is a listing of different port numbers and services that I will not dwell into any deeper right now. So this was the last slide for this first video lecture in chapter number 2. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments field. Otherwise, see you next time.